I participated in the 2025 Shovel Game Jam, where participants had 10 days to create a game. The theme for this Game Jam was Let's Get Started, and my submission is a game called Let's Get Started. In this video, I'll show you the whole process behind the creation of my game, including some of my mistakes. Your goal in this game is to create companies and sell them once they gain value to make a profit. You have to choose between different characteristics to create a startup, like the sector of activity, the type of service, if you're using AI in your company, and so on. Each year, different bonuses are selected, and if your company matches them, it gains more value. If you're too far off, it will lose money. To know what works, you can get hints in the world that would help you figure out some of these characteristics. Let's talk about the process for creating this game, one day at a time. Day 1 is when the theme of the jam was announced, and it was on Friday night, which means not that much time to do things, except if I decide to work all night. But that wasn't really my case. I decided to focus on finding an idea and ways to execute it. Now, keep in mind that I only have 10 days to execute this idea, and this is something to keep in mind at all times. You don't want to think of game mechanics that you can't implement. So for the first day, I simply focused on getting an idea. There was no coding or asset creation involved. I had a few ideas, but some of them didn't feel doable in the time limit, so I had to keep thinking for some time. Once I got my idea, Let's Get Started, I created a quick game design document, or GDD, with base information for the game. I also like to sleep on an idea to make sure it fits every aspect of the game development I have in mind. So this is what I did. On day 2, after a good night of sleep, all seemed fine to me about the game, so I started working on it. I improved the GDD and started coding. As such, I made the base UI for the game and the base for logic to create startups. Then, I decided to improve the creation UI. This is definitely not something done at the beginning when creating a game. You usually focus on improving things towards the end or at the very least the middle. But I wanted a clear view of what the UI would look like, even if what I have now is not the final version, because this is a key element for my game. After all, it's a text-based game, so I really wanted to make sure the vision I had for the game and for the UI would work. Then I made a basic room that would serve as a background for the game, so you don't just have plain text. And this is also a place where you can find hints. I then mess around with some post-processing and some lighting. Once again, this is usually something you don't do at the beginning of the process. And once again, I just wanted to have a basic overview of the general idea I have, so I would make sure that I was aiming in the right direction. It also turns out that I was quite satisfied with the post-processing and the light, so it actually helped me save some time towards the end of the jam. On day 3, I started working on more UI elements. For example, adding the main menu, which is used in the game, and a menu to display the information of the startups owned by the players. I started working on a value calculation logic to add values to your startups. At first, it was kind of messy, but I just wanted to make sure the logic worked, and then I would change that later. I cleaned some of my code as well, as I tried to keep everything as clean and neat as possible. In this whole process, it is clear that the UI of the game is important. So I knew I had to have some animations to make the UI more alive and not too boring. To do that, I had two options: either code animations myself, which takes time but can fit my vision, or use an existing asset from the Unity store. Because I want simple animations like fade in and out or scaling up and down, I decided to use an external asset as it would save me a lot of time. I used Darwin by Giant, which is probably one of the most used assets for UI animation. On day 4, I cleaned some code to make everything more readable. I've been trying to make sure this is done whenever I notice some redundant code or a function that does not belong somewhere. It may feel like some extra work, which might not be good when you have such a short deadline, but it helps me keep things neat and organized so I don't struggle to read my code or find the appropriate files. This has been helpful, especially as the project was growing. I added more UI elements and a net worth variable to see the value of companies. I also realized I need a random name generator. You can choose the name of your company, but at one point you might not have enough inspiration. So a random name generator is quite useful. To do that, I actually used Python and the Faker library, so I could create a list of random company names. I got a total of 100 names, but the script could get more if needed. I found that it was enough for the purpose of this game. And in Unity, I simply copied the list into an array of string. If I have time, I will implement a way to read the files with the names and pick from there. but from now, that would be enough. My script in Unity simply selects a random name from the list when called. Overall, I mainly worked on a lot of small UI functions to make it easier and more readable for users. That includes some animations, updating a text that displays the cost of startup as the player changes the investment value, and to make sure that the fields in the startup creations are emptied after a startup is created, and so on. I needed to start working on the hint logic, which was another big element for this game. So you can have hints in the environment about things to do to get the good bonuses for the startups. For hints, I figured an object with an outline around it would be a good way to show the hints in the world. As such, I added an outline shader on objects that highlights on mouse over. This is something I would change later to always have a highlight, but the color changes when your mouse is over it. Now, this is day 5, and we are officially halfway through the jam. On this day, I started working on a core mechanic of the game, which is hints. At first, I had a class that took care of generating a random list of features that are valued each year. And this will give a startup a bonus or a malus. However, I need this logic to happen twice, once for the current year and one for the next year, which would be used as current year and would be used for hints. After some work on that, I took a break in the hint process to work on the net worth feature. I wanted to display a value change between 2 years, which is shown in the end of a year recap panel. It just tells you how much your net worth has changed from one year to another. On this day, I also decided to start working on the music for the game, so I created a song which is close to some lo-fi hip-hop, and this kind of seemed like a good music theme for this type of game. It's chill, a bit upbeat, and it gives you a bit of a lo-fi girl vibe, and a bit of a startup vibe as well. After this, I improved the UI to have its final look, and there are still a lot of details I would like to work on. But these remain details and the general idea is here, and I need to focus on other things before doing that. On day 6, I decided to create the hints needed for the game. It's a very redundant task and can take a lot of time, so it seemed like using ChatGPT was a perfect use case here. I still had to proofread and change a lot of the hints, but it gave me a solid basis and saved me a lot of time. I feel like this kind of task of creating quick text that don't really have much value is where generative AI is quite useful. After I was done with all the hints, I added them in the game. After that, I worked on adding sound effects and music to the game. To me, this makes a huge difference and makes the game more alive. Here's what it is before sound effects and after adding sound effects. Then I started working on the logic to add a cost based on social media level and advertising level. Each selection adds a multiplier to a base cost, which is added to the cost of the startup. At first, my approach was that these parameters added to the bonus or minus for each year, but that did not make a lot of sense. Like, why would you be penalized for having too much social media presence, when in reality, it, usually with a few exceptions, helps the company grow. Finally, I made a second room that you can get after getting a certain amount of money. This second room will give you more hints than the first one. You now have a computer, a TV, and a phone to give you hints. It's now been a week since the beginning of the jam. It was time for me to create a start menu. What I thought would be an easy task turned out to be taking much longer than expected. I struggled to make the start menu, even though it's relatively simple. And this is because I wanted to make the game accessible, and the color contrast in this menu was not easy to manage. We had gray on black and white on gray, which is not really the best. So I had to use a secondary color to help with accessibility on some panels and buttons. In the menu, I added credits and a quick tutorial. The tutorial at the moment is just a panel in the menu, because I don't know if I'll have time to make an interactive tutorial. Hopefully I will, but for now that's all it's gonna be. I also added room number 3, which contains the last ways to get hints, which is a newspaper and a magazine. We're on day 8 and the game is getting close to being done. I added a tutorial that is more interactive than just a plain text like before. It felt like without a tutorial the game seemed overwhelming. I also added tooltips on top of objects in the world. Finally, I added a hand cursor to all buttons. Overall, with the exception of the tutorial, day 8 was mainly about improving the quality of life of the game and making things a bit clearer for the players. I also added a game over screen too. If you have no more money, then the game is over. And here we are, day 9. This is my final day. There's still an extra day for the game jam, but this will be the last day I worked on the game. The reason for that is, Every feature I have in mind that could be implemented would take too long, and I want to focus on making sure the game is ready to be shipped and playable, even if I wish there was more to it. So I focused on final touches. One main change I made is a new panel for startup creation, so it's not overwhelming for players to have a lot of fields at once. Now, it's only a few fields at a time, and some buttons to navigate the creation menu. I also fixed some typos and improved the readability of some code. Although, this will only be handy if I keep working on the project after the jam. Now, my game is ready, and I did some testing to make sure everything was right. This is how I found some bugs that I could fix, and some bugs that I unfortunately could not fix. For example, in WebGL, one sound effect is not playing at its normal volume. I tried googling this issue, and the best solution I found was to update Unity, which might not even be a solution. Unfortunately, I don't have time to do that, because updating Unity would mean fixing a lot of new problems in the project, and I would definitely not have time for that. Overall, this was a fun process to participate in this game jam. At first, the theme felt a bit overwhelming, as it was such a wide theme. Now, my game is far from perfect. While I like the visuals I was able to create during this time, it feels like my game has a major flaw. My vision was a bit too big for this jam. It feels like there's a lot of features that need to be implemented in the game to make it a bit more fun. Right now, the core mechanic is that you can lose all your money very quickly, and this could be improved by either not dying so easily or having a steady progression like what you would see in most management games. And while this game is functional, the fun aspect of it could definitely be improved, and that is a major component for any video game. With this in mind, I may keep working on this game to implement all the other ideas I have and that I could not put during the game. So I guess we'll see about that.